Hi everybody, my name is Gabriel Guerrero and this is the second video about a library I created called ngrx-traits. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to do filtering, sorting, and pagination. I will first do it locally in memory, and then we're going to change it to work with a remote backend. So we're going to continue with the previous example. Okay? So we have a list, the list that we built the last time, and we're going to be adding first the filter box on the top. That's going to do our local filtering. So we change back to the code, and we're going to add these addFilterEntitiesTrait. And like we did in the previous video, we're going to need to add the type for our entity. And this one is a second type, which is the type that represents your search. So in this case, I'm going to show you quickly this type. It simply is for the search box, but you can make it way more complicated. The important thing is that this type represents whatever comes out of your filter section. Right, so what we want to do is to first, because we want a local filtering, we want to add this filter function. The way to implement this is there are these two parameters that you receive, the filter and the entity. First thing you need to do is to ensure that if the filter is empty, it returns true. And then you implement whatever filter you want to implement. So in this case, I'm going to filter by the name. I'm going to say when the name includes the filter search field. And that's our filter function. One thing I hope that you have understood from the previous video, which I'm not going to be explaining anymore, is that every time that you add a trait, it adds a set of entities, a set of actions, selectors, effects, reducers. The main ones that you can see are the actions and the selectors. But I want to show you that if you hover over the traits, there is an explanation of each trait and an example, and in comment you will see what actions they generate and what selectors they generate. So if you don't want to check the documentation on the site, you can always hover on each of the traits and you will see what they are about. So we added this trait. Now we're gonna go to the container and start using it. The first thing that I want to use here is I want to use a selector that was added by the trait, that is to retrieve the last stored filter. Okay, we're gonna use that for our component, search component. Again, like in the previous cases, I already have other component that represents the search field. We're gonna be seeing that internally this time. So I'm gonna show you that in a second. First, I'm gonna connect it. I forgot to. We added the selector, but we didn't put it in here. Now we need to connect so that puts the value, the last stored value, into the form. And now we want when you do the search, you want to trigger our search action. So in this case, I'm going to create a method for our search. You see, we have a new action called filter products, and the filter products, there's a field that is called filters, which essentially has the type product filter. So you can see here that I have the search field, and like I said, when I created this component, the output of it is this. I'm using the same interface, so I just need to pass it along. Right, so that is our filtering connected. So if we go back to the example, you're gonna see, you see here, we now have the new search box, and when we search, for example, Zelda, you see it's working, it's doing the local filtering. One of the best features about this trait is that every time that you type, the search is debounce and this change by default, so you don't have to implement the logic. Let's go 1 second to the component so you can understand this more. So if we go here to the product search form and we go inside, you're gonna see that the implementation of this is very simple. I'm just using as the output this form value changes. Normally the way you implement this is that you create an engineering method, you subscribe to the form, and you will do a debounce and a distil change to the form control. This is to ensure that we don't trigger a search every time that you type, or if there wasn't a search box there, let's imagine that you have a progress bar. If you do the progress bar, you don't want to trigger a search every time that the progress bar changes. So that's why you implement the distil change and the debounce. The filter trait already implement this for you, so you don't have to do any of that. So the great benefit of this is that it makes this component simpler, and it also makes the testing of this component simpler. I will show you a bit more about this, how the debounce and the filtering works when we implement it in the with the remote backend, because you will see the request that they are not triggering every time. But the important thing is that you don't need to implement that logic in your component. Now let's go back to our trait file. This time we're gonna add the sorting. So the sorting trait, similar to other traits, you just need to add the type of your entity and a few parameters. So in this case, we're gonna say there's a remote, set it to false to indicate that it should do the sorting in memory, and you need to provide a default sorting column. So this is the default order in which the results from the backend are coming. So in this case, I'm gonna say it's by ID, and the direction is ascending. Notice that if you notice here, this is showing the fields of the product type, so it's all properly typed for you. Now that we added that, we go back to the container and similarly that we did with the filtering, we need to now use a new selector that returns the last sort used. So we're gonna add it here. We're gonna need to pass it along to the list, and we go here to the list, and here we pass the last sort, and we need to add an event that is triggered when they click on the columns of the table. Remember, this is all implemented with Angular material, so if you want to check the code, it is in the GitHub repo. They are very simple components. They're just inputs and output basically. Now we just need to call our action. And if we go now to our example and we try to sort, you see that is working. So that's local sorting. And finally, we're gonna add pagination. So this one, again, it needs the type of your entity and a few parameters here. So there are 3 types of paginations. The first type that we're going to use here is full. That means that it expects that when you do your load entities effect, the result that is coming from the backend has the full set of results. So it is simply splitting it in memory, the pages. that has many use cases, especially when like you do a shopping cart and kind of stuff that you don't need, that you're creating stuff in memory. And there is also the default, which is partial, which means that it's gonna store by default 3 pages, the 3 last pages in the cache. So I'm gonna show you that when we turn on when we transform everything to do remote pagination. And finally there is grow, which is similar to partial, but partial keeps 3 pages in cache all the time. So when it reaches the last page, it will load more and get the 2 pages more. Grow keeps the previous cache in, so it's only concatenating more and more pages. So the grow is useful for infinite scrolling. But I'm going to show you probably that in another article or another video. For now, we're going to use only full and partial. One more important parameter here is the page size. So by default is 10 items, but I'm going to change it because this screen is very small. I'm going to change it to be 5. So let's go now to our container. The main thing that we need to do here now is to change. Remember that this select product list returns all the items in the store, but this time that's going to include all the pages. So we don't want that. We want to use a new selector that is added when you add the pagination trait. That is the select products current page list. Okay. And we also want to change this is products loading to is product current page loading. That is important because you're gonna see that every time we have 3 pages in cache. When we reach the last page of the cache, in the background it's gonna make another call to load 3 more pages. So if you were using the other is loading, you will see a spinner in the page, but it's not really loading that page that you're seeing. It's really loading the next pages. So when you change it to use is product current page loading, you will not see that. And finally, we need one more selector that is for the pagination controls. This one, select product current page info. I'm gonna do that here. Now we can use it in our template. So we're gonna use the math paginator, and we just need to connect a bunch of variables. So length is the total, so we need to do you need to connect also the page size. And finally we need to connect an event for the every time that the page is triggered, load another page trigger. So let's call this load page. We're gonna use our new action, load products page. This one just receives the index of the page that you want to load. And that's pretty much it, because it's all local pagination. Let's check if this is working. Okay, yeah, you are seeing here, this is the new paging controls. So you see that it's working. Again, right now everything is in memory, so you're not gonna see that spinner that I mentioned before, but you can see here that the pagination works with the filtering. All the traits are designed to work together when you add them, so they are aware of the presence of other traits, and they change the logic depending on that. One important thing that I forgot to mention is that all these traits, the filtering trait, the sorting trait, and the pagination trait, they depend on the load entities trait. So they are just adding extra functionality to what the load entities is providing. So if you try to add one of these and the load entities is not present, you will get an error saying I need this dependency. Now we're going to transform all these to be remote pagination. So the first thing that we need to do here to make it remote is, for the sorting, you need to make it remote true. For the filtering, you just need to remote this function, and that will make it behave like in remote pagination. And finally, for this one, we're going to change it to be partial. So what happens here is that when the remote pagination is triggered, the filter actions are simply gonna call the load products action added by the load entities, and we're gonna see how that works now. So we need to go to the effect that we created in the last video. This is the load entities. You see here that we're simply calling load products, and the load product call our backend. But now we're gonna need to add a few selectors here. First, we need to add the select filter selector. And we also need the sorting. And we need a new one that we haven't used before, that is select product page request, which gives you the details that you need for pagination when it's requesting. So remember, the other trait, filter sorting pagination, every time that they need more data, they're gonna call these action load products. So now we just need to use these parameters to call our backend. So the first parameter is our action, which has no parameters, so we're not going to use that. And then is the filter, then the sort, then pagination. The way I implemented my backend service is that if you didn't pass anything, it was returning everything to you. But now that you can pass parameters, and then it's going to filter accordingly. So first we're going to do the filtering. So if the filter is present, otherwise it sends an empty parameter, so it still returns everything. And now we're gonna do take, which is the page size basically. The size, not the page size. It is this. In this case, we want 3 pages, so it's the total size that you're requesting to the backend. And well, this is. I mean, the names of these properties, it depends how you implement your backend, but generally you need these kind of names. And skip is the start index. And finally, we need to add the sorting. In this case, this sorting is a Boolean field, so I'm gonna transform it to be a Boolean condition here. And one last very important thing is that, remember, this call, when you were not sending anything, it was returning the entire result set, but now it's returning as a partial set. So there is you need to pass now a total field. So our backend is returning the result list plus a total field because it's not returning everything, and we need to pass that to our action. And if we go now to our example, we're gonna see that, let's go to our request network, so you can see the request being done. So you see here, you can see that it's doing request, but it's not showing the spinner. The reason of that is, like I said, every time that you reach the last page of the cache, in the background is doing fetching more. So you will not see the spinner unless you go really fast. So let's go fast here. You see the spinner. And so that's pagination working remotely. We can test, for example, filtering. You can see it's doing the right thing. is passing all the parameters, and if you try sorting, the same thing. It's all working. So one last thing that I wanted to show you is it would be nice to have a URL parameters. So basically you will have page and searching and all the stuff in the URL. So there is a trait for that. And we're going to add it here in our traits file. This one, addEntitiesSyncToRouteParameters. It's very important. You need to have a Angular router configured, and this should be a page on the route, which I already did. And now when you go here, you're gonna see that if I search, you see that the URL has the parameters, and if you page, it's changing, and if you sort, it's all in the URL now. But you need something that is that if you refresh the page, you want it to be reset to this state, right? So when you add this trait, it adds a new action that we're gonna use here. If you remember in our last video, in the ng init, you need to call this action load products when it starts. Now there is a new action that is called load products using routeQueryParams, and that's all you need. It should be calling once when you need the component, because after that it's simply syncing the URL state to the store. So now that you see that it populated the search field, and the sorting is now saying that it's by this one. So it's all working. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will do more videos. The next one is a very interesting one, because I'm gonna transform this example that I show you, and you know that it's using ngrx, so it's using the actions and the selector on the store. It's all global. But what will happen if you needed this as a local store, i.e. something similar to component store? So in the next sample, I'm going to show you how to transform this to be in local store. So you will be able to create several instances of this list, and each instance will have state that is independent from each other. Yeah, I will be doing more videos. There will be one more about how to create your own traits, which is going to be very interesting, because it's a great way to share code, or if you find a pattern that you repeat a lot in your application, it's a great way to solve a problem. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a really nice day.